It's getting to be a running gag that I keep saying I wish I'd said this in the vanilla video, and I've thought of yet another thing that I wish I'd said then. Before World of Warcraft, there was Warcraft 3. Really, World of Warcraft is kind of like an epilogue to Warcraft 3 in a lot of ways. Kobolds, gnolls, ogres, all of those were Warcraft 3 creeps. A lot of the characters from World of Warcraft, like Jaina, Sylvanas, Thrall, Cairn Bloodhoof, all of them were characters from Warcraft 3. Illidan was a villain from Warcraft 3, or really I think of him as more as a fallen hero. Arthas is the same way, but he was played up as the most dangerous villain walking the planet as of the end of Warcraft 3, and when World of Warcraft came out, we all knew it was a matter of time before we'd face him. Wrath of the Lich King was the expansion where we faced him. Of course, the very fact that we knew exactly where this expansion was going made it different from previous eras in WoW. Vanilla was essentially, hey players, look at this world we've built. Go ahead and have fun in it. The Burning Crusade was pretty much the same way. It was like, hey players, the Dark Portal opened. Go ahead and have fun in Outland. Neither Vanilla nor the Burning Crusade really had a unifying story or a main antagonist, but Wrath of the Lich King had both of those. Wrath of the Lich King was like, hey players, go get badass and kill Arthas. Arthas was an imposing presence from the beginning to the end of the leveling process. He appeared in quests, instances, and even some raids before the final raid. It almost, but not quite, felt like he was too present. It's worth stating that Blizzard had originally intended for Illidan to be the main antagonist of the Burning Crusade. And to be fair, he was behind the Fel Orcs in Hellfire Peninsula, and if it weren't for him, Kael'thas and Lady Vashj wouldn't even be in Outland. But all in all, Illidan was really just one of many dangerous enemies to think about in the Burning Crusade. The fact that Arthas was everywhere in Wrath of the Lich King is probably Blizzard overreacting to the fact that Illidan was nowhere in the Burning Crusade. It's also worth adding that Wrath of the Lich King began the trend of centering expansions on main antagonists. This was only interrupted in Mists of Pandaria. This isn't the only way that Wrath was a real turning point in WoW's development. Heroics were now officially before raids in the progression, and heroics were much more accessible and much easier. In the Burning Crusade in Vanilla, when you were in a dungeon, even if it wasn't a heroic, every pull was choreographed so that you don't pull any more mobs than you have to. And you had to use crowd control on any mob you weren't actively tanking and DPSing. Heck, in Vanilla, you had to keep your main target from running away at low HP and getting more packs to gang up on you. They stopped running roughly in Wrath of the Lich King. And by that point, players were so powerful that they could rush into a pack of mobs, tanks could AoE to get aggro, and players could do AoE DPS to get them all killed. This charge in and AoE everything philosophy made you feel more powerful, and it made dungeons tend to go faster. The only real danger to your party was if your tank didn't slow down so your healers could recover mana between battles, and having played a healer back then, that did sometimes happen. In order to support this new rush in and AoE everything philosophy, the classes did have to change. For instance, Druid's Hurricane spell, which had been in place since Vanilla, had its cooldown removed. Rogues got a new Fan of Knives ability, and all priests got Mindseer. Making Wrath of the Lich King content much more accessible meant that more and more players could enjoy this game, so it was no wonder it was so popular. The Badge of Justice system made a reappearance in Wrath of the Lich King, but it was called emblems now. Each tier of content had a particular emblem associated with it. Tier 7 had emblems of heroism and emblems of valor. Tier 8, which was Ulduar, had emblems of conquest. Tier 9, which was the Trials of the Crusader, had emblems of triumph, and Icecrown Citadel had emblems of frost. Blizzard pretty much said to themselves, every time we release a new tier of content, we'll create a new type of emblem. These emblems could be used to purchase your actual tier set from some of the later tiers. Earlier tiers only had a few pieces directly purchasable with emblems. The tier token system was still around for heroic level gear even at higher tier levels. You can tell getting these emblems was a really good idea. And there were daily heroic quests that let you get more of these emblems than you'd get from just killing heroic bosses too. The fact that these daily heroic quests existed meant that everyone wanted to get into these dungeons, and that demand meant that you'd easily be able to find a group to get into that content. It's probably what kept me coming to the game in Wrath of the Lich King. Of course, for most of the game, you still had to spam looking for group chat to actually get into these dungeons, but then halfway through the game, Blizzard introduced the looking for group matchmaking system. Completing a dungeon through looking for group got you the same reward as you would have gotten through the daily heroic quest. And it was faster to get in and out of the dungeons because you no longer had to actually go to the portal, nor did you need to stay in the city and spam looking for group chat. While you were queued, you could leave the city and farm titanium or do daily quests or whatever. Again, this made the game much more accessible, and you could in fact get your tier set without having to set foot in a raid, because farming these easy heroics long enough would get you enough emblems to buy your tier set. This also got you geared up faster if you wanted to get into these raids. And Blizzard once again changed their raid design philosophy. The fact is, they never made many 10-man raids in the Burning Crusade, just 2. Just about every raid was 25-man. Now, having 10-man raids is a good thing, and the idea existed as far back as vanilla, and it's good for smaller guilds like the one I was in back in Cataclysm. But having more players in an encounter allows for more epic battles, and both players and Blizzard employees prefer the epic stuff. I think that's why Blizzard focused so much on 25-man content back then. But not wanting to make the same mistake again, Blizzard came up with a compromise. Every raid has 2 versions, a 10-man version and a 25-man version. That way, Blizzard can please everyone without having to make extra dungeons. The system worked well, and once again, it made the game more accessible, so that you don't need to merge 2 smaller guilds together and squabble over loot in order to see and face Arthas. And the moment when you see and face Arthas is a moment you do not want to miss out on. In fact, the moment when you face Arthas and bring him down was the moment that everything in the Warcraft universe had led up to since the first campaign in Warcraft 3. But at the same time, there was a whole continent to explore before you could do that attack. Unlike the Burning Crusade in vanilla, Blizzard filled this continent to the brim with story. The fact is, Arthas has had years to build up his army and get new minions. This expansion told the story behind those minions, and there are stories behind the Alliance and the Horde forces going up into Northrend to face him. The Argent Dawn had its own stories about how it came together to fight Arthas. The Knights of the Ebon Blade is the same way. They're like the opposite of the Argent Crusade in a lot of ways, yet they're on the same side. It made for some interesting dynamics. There were other threats in the Northrend besides Arthas. Malygos had gone crazy, and was essentially trying to shut down mortal use of magic. There was a lot of Titan technology and ruins scattered hither and yon in Northrend as well, and there was an old god lurking underground that you had to take out. These were good and gripping stories that made excellent use of Warcraft's characters. On the subject of those characters, King Varian made his debut. There were some quests in vanilla hinting that he might be alive, but this expansion is where he really appeared. They gave him a solid backstory and they used it. They showed how much he hates the Horde and would like to see the world rid of them since they mistreated him and apparently betrayed a joint offensive. It also showed how Jaina wanted peace between the Horde and the Alliance, at least at that point in time. It was really in Wrath of the Lich King that story began to be really important in WoW, and since then it's only become more and more important. Blizzard also started implementing some new and interesting technology to tell these stories. For instance, phasing was introduced in Wrath of the Lich King. To give an example of how phasing works, let's say that Blizzard invented a quest chain where you liberate a town. It only makes sense that enemies would stop spawning in that town after the quests were completed. Of course, the way the game was built, spawn points don't change, nor does the landscape change. That lasted until Wrath of the Lich King. Phasing was a new technology that allowed Blizzard to make what amounts to multiple layers of the same area. One layer might be full of enemies and represent the state of a base before you free it from Scourge control, and then another layer might be full of quest-giving NPCs and vendors and represents the state of that base after you free it from Scourge control. Blizzard could move a player from one layer to the next to simulate the progression through a story. This really helped to give a feel that you were changing the landscape and the course of the war, and that the things you did really made a difference and made things better for you. Plus, having a new town where you can get quests and sell items is a good reward from a gameplay perspective. Another excellent piece of technology that they added which helped a lot with gameplay: vehicles. There were and are quests that had you hop into a tank or a plane or a helicopter and drive it around and blast enemies with all kinds of different weapons, and let me tell you, it was awesome. We had been seeing steam tanks and catapults and ballistae in the game for a long time, but we'd never actually gotten to use them until now. Given all of these improvements, and given how accessible, fun, riveting, and interesting the game was from both a gameplay and a lore perspective, it was no wonder that Wrath of the Lich King saw World of Warcraft at its peak of popularity. Next time, I'll discuss a class that saw a surge of popularity at that time too, the Paladin class.